All right, I'd like to call the Public Works Committee in order at 6:04 p.m. Welcome, everybody. On tonight's docket, first up, we have consider ordinance and policy for lead service lateral replacement. Leanne, would you like to walk us through this?
Actually, I'm going to let Mark that. He was
The author. All right, Mark, please take it away.
As you may know, we've had some discussions about the lead copper rule, the impact that it's going to have on the water utility. You know, we've been doing voluntary lead service replacement programs for a number of years with our water main programs. You know, at this point in time, we're looking to get proactive in that measure for the community, both to take advantage of the large infrastructure projects we already have planned in the next few years, as well as in anticipation of the most likely eventuality that at some point in time, the Environmental Protection Agency will mandate such a program for communities like the village of Shorewood. So enclosed in your packets today is a multi-page summary of the initial draft, staff draft. I kind of took the lead on this and then worked with Leanne and others to kind of craft it in its current form. Basically what this program will do, and the accompanying ordinance amendment, is make the private side lead service line replacements mandatory for our residents when the work is done, either in conjunction with the water main program, a public side service replacement, or private side service repair, or public side service repair. We also have some language in there that describes other programs specifically for lead lateral or lead lines replacements. Again, looking towards the future, there may be times when we may take just independent initiatives to achieve that outside of our water main projects. So the framework of this pretty much says that in order to be eligible with the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin to have the utility provide financial assistance to homeowners, we have to have a ordinance and a lead service replacement program of similar nature to what's before you today. The Public Service Commission will allow the water utility to contribute up to 50% of the cost to replace the customer side lead service lines. This program will also allow for a capability village can contribute additional funds towards those costs, and then also sets forth the parameters for which we will potentially defer the customer's costs over a 3-year period as well. Trying to make this as affordable as possible, but with the overreaching goal of establishing a systematic process to accomplish this objective within a 20-year or so time frame. So it'll need to be fairly aggressive, and it'll need to be managed at the utility level. So as we develop various programs within the utility department for either main replacements or other lead service line replacements, then those will filter out to the customers, and they'll get those service lines replaced at that time. Any highlights? I mean, there's I hope that you've had an opportunity to briefly read through this. Again, the intent is to be clear, identifying again the funding and the nature of when we're going to require those replacements. There's always an option for the homeowner to replace their lead service line earlier than the village program may come around to their area or street. And they're always free to do that. If they do that, the village will replace the public side at the same time. But if they do that, they're not eligible for municipal and utility funding. Again, we really want to manage this project and drive it at the utility level so that we can do so in a orderly and cost-effective manner.
Great. The document is really, really fantastic. I appreciate this. The initiative, this is a really fantastic start to what is just a giant, giant problem. So thank you so much for putting this together. I'd like to kind of go around the room here and ask the other Public Works Committee members if they have any questions for Mark about this document, both documents. So ordinance 3043 and policy 44.
I just want to be clear. So when, let's say you do my street in 5 years or whatever. And so the village at that time is going to replace the main down the middle of the road. And then everybody on my block is getting theirs fixed as well, replaced as well if they have a lead line, right?
That's correct.
And then, so all of us on our block on that street, we would all have to basically, not necessarily have to, but we would either have to pay for it ourselves to be replaced, or we would have to take up this agreement. And then let's say the cost of replacing our half, the homeowner's half of it for each home is $7,000. I know that number's been thrown around once in a while. So then the water utility would pay 50% of that.
Correct.
The village would contribute some financing, maybe up to 25%.
Correct.
And then whatever's remaining, we could just tack onto our water bill for the remaining until it's paid off, basically, for up to 12 months.
That's correct.
At 0% interest.
Assuming all the funding is worked out, which we will clearly work out as this program develops. The intent is not to require homeowners to have upfront cash contributions.
Okay.
Again, trying to make this what we need to
terms of like the 40 years is kind of choose your street. I don't know. It's just recently resurfaced. The line to be. Or just when I'm talking to people. Thinking about that.
Yep. Oh. I think there'll be a number of options, scenarios, approaches. That would certainly be one. I think that will be a bit of a group effort also. Certainly staff will draft an implementation plan or schedule, and that would come to the Public Works Committee and the Village Board for final.
Okay, great.
I think that would be fair to say you'll have a year notice because the DPW doesn't undertake a road construction lightly. So I think that's one of the first thing. Unless your water main breaks.
I think in probably most cases, you'll have significantly longer than that. Certainly this first year will be the shortest notice. The 2024 program would be second shortest. You know, we have phase 1 in 23 of the combined sewer area improvements, phase 2 in 24. And then Lake Drive is 26 with the third phase of the. So I would anticipate that within the next year or so, we will have at least a general idea or a general schedule of the implementation over the course of those 20 years. So some people will have a really long notice. Some will have shorter and some will have middle.
I think that's just the sort of general guideline would put people at ease.
Agreed.
Sorry, one last question. Just for those people who are going to be, who street isn't going to be done for say 15, 20 years. Is there like a agreed upon thing people should do to reduce lead? Is like a home filtration system the best and only option, or?
The easiest option is to do what most people do right now, which is
Just run your water.
to just run your water.
Sure.
Milwaukee Water Works adds the orthophosphate, which
Sure.
provides that barrier on the inside of the pipe. As long as you run water or flush water prior to ingesting it after it's sat for more than 6 hours, studies have shown that the lead exposure from that water is extremely minimal.
Mhm.
So it's really just good kind of practice,
Just good.
which I think not in all cases, but in most cases is typical human behavior, I would
Sure,
say. I don't think most people will get up and stick a glass of water under the faucet and turn the faucet on and, right?
Let it get
We
cold a
like,
little
we
bit,
like to let
right.
it get cold. And once it gets cold, you're pulling it in from the main. It's been underground.
Sure.
So typical human behavior will minimize that. There are certainly things that you can do to improve that exposure reduction. And we can certainly make some of those measures. They exist on our website. During part of this communication plan, we can make sure that we make an effort to direct people to those resources so that everyone understands, what steps they can take, but they may not be already.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or else we can entertain
I will make a motion. I move to recommend ordinance 3043 and policy 44 to the village board for adoption.
Second.
I,
Mark, really appreciate the effort put into it.
We've all been talking about this for a while.
Yeah. Next on the agenda, we're here to consider Lake Drive parking restrictions. Lake Drive parking.
I will briefly introduce it. This is a request that was submitted under the village's traffic and parking regulation request program. The request was submitted by Felix Burkhardt on Lake Drive. And as noted in the memo, there are some concerns regarding parking adjacent to a relatively unique driveway configuration. And these concerns have been documented for going back for some time. Our staff recently reviewed this and recommends that the committee favorably consider the installation of no parking between driveway signs in 3 locations adjacent to the addresses that are noticed, that are outlined in the memo.
I don't. This seems like a pretty straightforward, request and common sense action that the department is making. I know we don't want to get in the habit of, doing these, kind of one-off exceptions to what the practice is. But in this case, we're expending a lot of resources to have to manage the situation. And it seems like it would be a better use of village resources to just go ahead and, mark this as, as the department recommends.
Yeah, I mean, this seems pretty straightforward. I agree. You hate to do one-off things, but that's just the way the village is designed. There are unique spaces that need unique attention. So.
I did, and they were, they asked that you favorably consider, as noted, it's a significant resource drain, particularly in the summer. And they would be thrilled to have some action taken to potentially reduce the calls to that area.
Trustee Lynn, do you want to make your first motion here?
Sure.
Do you feel
so
prepared?
just to clarify, can I make I should make a motion to recommend to the board that we adopt the plan as written. Okay. All right. So I'll make a formal motion to recommend to the full board that we adopt this parking restriction plan as written.
Does it, just
Does
a
that
point of
count?
clarification, does this have to go to the full board?
It does, because it'll require an ordinance change.
Great, okay.
But there's a detailed motion in your memo.
Oh,
It's page
I don't know
11.
if you knew this. You guys can click on the topic.
okay.
On your.
Oh, I see. Okay. So I see. Okay. Thank you. I move that the Public Works Committee recommend the restriction of parking between the driveways serving 4082 North Lake Drive and the installation of no parking between driveways signage at 4074, 4082, and 4090 North Lake Drive.
I'll second that.
I'm just wondering, I notice it says signage. For some reason, people tend to not notice a lot of signs. What are the chances that we could get orange paint on the curb?
At this point, staff is not recommending that. We don't have any mechanism to, we don't own that type of equipment. We typically do not paint curbs. And so we would recommend that we at least start with the signage.
Okay, thank you.
I would just say we've painted on the sidewalks and street before without an ordinance change. So if it were to get to that point, I think it's an option. We did that with the sidewalks several years ago with the bikes.
Right.
So The sidewalk thing was a totally different situation, not related to, just that we were able to do that several years without an ordinance change at the whole thing.
Right,
Well-
but it's a very, very different item.
Sure, yeah.
Fortunately, I do fear that they'll continue to park at these spots in this, village. So we have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Next on the agenda, we're here to consider requests for traffic calming measures on Wilson Drive. Leah?
Also under the Traffic and Parking Regulation Request Program, a request has been submitted for traffic calming, specifically the additional pedestrian signage, flags, or flashing beacons at the intersection of North Wilson Drive and East Olive. You will all note that there is a crossing there that connects Olive with the Oak Leaf Trail connector. There's a few pictures in your packet. I will note that this is very busy crossing. It is probably the best marked crossing and constructed and designed crossing in the entire village. That said, I don't doubt that it is an issue or a concern. I do not believe that additional signage will have any impact. I'm not certain as to what the flag request relates to. I think you'll often see when new signs are installed, communities will put flags on top of them. I don't necessarily personally believe that that has much of any impact at all. The third item that's noted is flashing beacons. So you're familiar with the rapid flashing beacons that we previously had some installed on Wilson Drive, currently have rapid flashers at locations on Oakland Avenue. If the committee wished to entertain that request, those would have to be I said we would strongly suggest that those become a capital request for the 2023 budget due to the expense of purchasing and installing those. They would have to be solar powered as there's not a power source draw from in that area. The memo does note the estimated cost for that installation would be, where am I? Just
Close to 6,000, I
close
think.
to $6,000. So we would look to budget that as a capital request for 2023 installation if the board so directed.
Thank you, Leanne. Any questions?
I have a question. For the places on Oakland where we do have the solar beacons there, what was the process by which those went up? And, do we feel like those are helping to solve the problem?
This particular program was not in place, so there was a bit of a different process. It
Okay.
was, would say also community driven. It's something the board directed DPW to implement. I would say that you could probably argue, it's the same thing as people are going to park in front of a no parking sign. There will be
Mhm.
motorists that don't heed the
Right.
beacons. But I certainly think they do provide an extra measure of awareness.
Okay.
The flashing ones outside of Metro and there's a few others. I think there's others on Wilson as well.
Not currently.
Oh, not anymore. Okay.
There were prior to the reconstruction. They were at Congress.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And those were done. Those started as a recommendation from the Pedestrian Bike Safety Committee. And then we ended up getting a grant for 30,000 that helped pay for some of the sign. I don't know if it paid for all of them, but that helped pay for get like the first few installed.
Okay.
I mean, it is helpful. It's nice for pedestrians to at least have something proactive they can do too as they get to the street, to press that button and know that they've like initiated the process of them crossing the street. That's usually helpful. The research on the lights is that they, it's like I said, it's one extra step, because drivers they see the signs, but since there's not always a pedestrian there, they don't always acknowledge what it's for or know what it, 2-3 cars back, they don't know what they're stopping for necessarily. And when there's a flashing light, it's pretty obvious you're stopping for a pedestrian. So, I mean, they're helpful. They don't alleviate everything, but I think it's better than nothing. So
I will add that I believe in terms of locations for rapid flashing beacons, this is probably one of the better locations in the village, simply because there are bump outs here, and the curbs are pulled in, and the pedestrian refuge island actually does not allow a car to pass on the right if a vehicle is stopped yielding to a pedestrian. In other cases, and particularly on Wilson Drive where you have width, you do have the potential to create a dangerous situation if someone is doing what they're supposed to and waiting, and a car coming up behind them doesn't know why they're stopping and will try to pass them on the right. That can become a very concerning situation. In this particular location, that cannot happen because of the width of the crosswalk and the intersection there.
I would have just said one more thing too, is that we, the Pedestrian Bike Safety Committee, we used to work with the police chief, with the former chief. This was all pre-COVID, but they had an ongoing targeted enforcement plan of unmarked crosswalks, or not unmarked, but marked crosswalks that aren't at a controlled intersection. And the ticket for that is like $280 some odd. It's an enormous ticket for failure to yield to a pedestrian in a marked crosswalk. And I know that we saw some improvement on Oakland Avenue after we gave a few tickets of that size, and kind of word got out that it's expensive to not yield to a pedestrian. So if we don't do, there is quite good signage at that location. And if we don't want to go with buying another solar powered flashing beacon, I think it would be well within our means to talk to the new police chief and set up another coordinated enforcement plan where they could, ticket some people for failing to yield to pedestrians. It's right there. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Trustee Lynn. Any members of the public would like to speak on this matter? Please just bend the microphone down, and you have to speak right into the microphone, and state your name and your address.
Okay, my name is Lois Weisner. I live at 1202 East Kenmore Place, which is about 3/4 of a block from that intersection. It is not in front of the police department. It's close, but they have no windows that look out on it. My bedroom windows look out on it. I can see it. Our condo is just south of the Kingo Church. It is a very busy intersection for walkers and bikers and people taking their dogs on walks. And when I go there, when I'm going into the park for the farmer's market, which is a very busy time on Sunday mornings, or if I'm going over there to have a picnic or to walk in the park, I am my own traffic cop to cross the street, because cars do not, more often than not, they don't stop. They don't stop. I step out, I look at the car coming, and I look at them, and I wave back, and I get to the middle, and then I do the same for the cars coming the other way. It is not safe, and it is the main entrance to the park. Raina Grogan, who I talked to the other day after I saw this on the agenda, I called her because I wanted to know, what was going on and why she had concerns. I said, so do I. She said that even if she's got her little boy in a stroller, that little refuge thing in the middle actually isn't even big enough for her stroller and her to stand there. It's not a wonderful, safe island, to be honest with you. She has said, now I'll tell you, I have not seen this, but she said that she has seen cars. If there's a small car waiting there, for instance, for her, and there's someone coming up behind that car who does not know why that car is stopped, and that car is a small one, she has seen that car go around in the bike lane and go through. I'm just,
With the width of that, it's not possible.
They'd be going on the sidewalk.
They'd have to
Yes,
drive up on the
she-
sidewalk.
I'm only
Yep.
telling you what she told me and her great concern about taking her life and her child's life in her. Now, I realize the people, what her concern was, people going around into the bike lane and going around the car. The other major problem, which isn't in here, and maybe I need to fill out one of these forms, is that people aren't stopping. They are not stopping. And whether that means you need all those things in the street where people have to, what's that called?
Speed bump.
Speed bump
Speed bump.
on either side. I know we don't want to do that, but how do we get people to change their behavior? So that's why I'm here, because I would like to see something done for the safety, because having someone get hurt or killed up at that intersection would be a really sad, traumatic thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Rima.
Oh, okay.
Feel free to step up if you'd like to
Yeah.
join this conversation. So just step up to the
Just
microphone,
say your name and address and right in.
My name is Rayma Gogan. I live at 4107 North Woodburn. Put through the request because my little guy sleep at the moment, but we walk multiple times a day, every day through that intersection. And we moved there in October of last year. And unfortunately, we almost every single time we go across that crosswalk, whether it's during the day or especially in the evening, we come in contact with people who are either speeding through there at an alarming rate, or, for instance, one of the last times that my husband said, we need to probably call someone about this, was we were walking across with our stroller and my husband. So we should have been easily spotted. Someone had tried to stop at the other crosswalk, kind of about 30 or 40 feet from us, and someone tried zooming around them in the bike lane to go around them. Thankfully, the car that stopped for us honked, or else they would have smashed right into us. And every circumstance I go across, if I run into other mom and dads, elderly people, they all say, when we walk into the intersection, they say, "Oh, you're brave." They don't stop here. And unfortunately, I feel like we shouldn't be called brave for just trying to cross this park. And I know that that's the only entrance into Estherbrook anywhere close to us. And I know that the beer garden has opened up now, and the farmer's market is about to open up. And there's a lot of traffic there where people say they're scared to cross the street. And I have even experienced this before at night. Yes, there are the little yellow triangles. It's hard to sometimes see people. And unfortunately, we don't see through there, but you would think they would slow down because the police station is right there, but they don't. They just whiz past. And we had some visitors from out of state, and they said, wow, they don't stop here. And so I had made a suggestion about possibly, there's the Metro Market right on Oakland that has the flashing lights. I understand people, it could be an extra investment, and that's not always wanted, but even up in Bayside, we're there all the time for the Autobahn, they have these collectors that have small fluorescent flags that explain how to use them, take them from one side of the street to the other. Some sort of added security measure, because I personally want to feel safe being able to walk with my little one and not having to have flashing lights on our stroller and my husband walk and, kind of wave at people to get them to stop. So if any measures can be taken, I know everyone in our neighborhood that we come in contact with says the same thing when we're walking. So anything could be helpful, because we'd hate to have something, a close call, turn into tragedy. Hopefully not.
Thank you so much for your.
My name is Gary Bronk. I live at 1827 East Kenmore Place. I'm the chair of the Parks and Public Spaces Committee. I'm actually here for the next request. But I wanted to add to this because pedestrian safety is a big issue for us. We've now incorporated the bike and pedestrian safety committee. We're going to be working with the Senior Services Advisory Committee to do walking audits. This is out of a concern for pedestrian safety in general around the village. It's obviously a big concern for people who are elderly or who have mobility issues, which is why we're going to be collaborating with them. I want to just say personally that I have a grandson who lives on Kensington. For the first year of his life, my wife and I took care of him 5 days a week, and we often walked across to the park. And the crosswalk that's up there is probably not as bad as the one that you're talking about. But all the same issues that were raised here, I've seen there. And we have a couple of members of the committee who live close to there, and they've also raised this issue. I know the flashing lights aren't the B end and all at the end of everything, and I know that they're expensive, and so I think that it makes sense that it be part of a fiscal request for next year. But I think we need to be looking for more measures that actually, I'm about to buy a little cheap camping trailer, and they're stolen frequently. And so I'm looking at these videos, and they say, you know, nobody's going to stop you from, you can't really stop somebody from stealing, but as many locks as you can have on it will dissuade people from doing it. So this is my attitude. I mean, there's many ways that we have to warn people and to raise awareness about issues. Because one of these days, our committee is going to get together, and we're going to be there with water balloons, and we're going to start using water balloons with people.
Well, that's generous. Water balloons are generous. I was thinking other things, but water balloons are very generous of you. Thank you, Gary. Anybody else from the public that would like to speak on this? If not, then I will just share my thoughts. I couldn't agree more with all of you. I live on Morris Boulevard. I have a 10-year-old. I have a puppy across that street. I'm with the farmers market. So, and today I'm basically, so it's a daily occurrence. Nobody stops, and I just stand there with my arms up in the air, like, does anybody see the sign? And it's ridiculous. And I know that flashing beacons, all these things aren't going to stop people, but you know what? Whatever we can do to get the locks, to get more locks on the street or get more deterrence on the street, the better, in my opinion. So I'd be very much in favor of recommending the beacons, because it is another step. I think maybe with collaboration with Parks and Open Spaces Committee, we can talk about different things, fluorescent flags, and different sort of items like that. But I think from a village perspective, if this is something that we can get fit into the budget, I do think it's necessary, because there's a dance studio going in right there with young kids that are going to be all in that area. There's the church right there, and then there's the farmers market. So for me, this makes a ton. I'd be very, very much at least. Just one question that I have for Leanne is: this cost just for one, or is this like what would we for the $5,700? One giant beacon? Is this?
It's a pair.
It's a pair.
It's a pair at last week's prices.
Nice. Okay. Those are only going down, right? Okay. And maybe once it's approved, we can collaborate and try to find grant money or try to find other. I do think that whatever we can do, and also talk to the police. An issue with summer coming.
Yeah, I think so I used to be the chair of the pedestrian bike safety committee when it was standalone, and we had explored a number of options for street crossing. The flashing lights, they're really the best option that you can do kind of on the go. Putting in speed bumps, raising the crosswalk, those are huge projects. And because we have snow, the plows crush them all the time. With things like the flags, we've looked into flags before in the past. They're like the lowest cost. They're also like the lowest result option, not only because you can't always tell, like the kids will go to grab them, they're waving them around. They might not necessarily cross the street right at that moment. You don't really know what they're doing. And then they eventually all get stolen. And then you got to, replace them. But the flashing lights, I mean, they do work. Outside of a stoplight, it's really the best possible option.
If you all wouldn't mind, I'd love to. Recommendations. I move to recommend the village board. I move to recommend the village board purchase and installation solar powered rapid flashing crossing the section of North Wilson Drive and Olive Street. Cost of $700.
I'll second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, if you would permit me, we have minimal time, but I did want to note that Mr. Burkhardt from the earlier request was in the waiting room and not admitted to the meeting. I see that he is listening in now. So I did want to mention to him that his request was favorably granted and see if he had any comment, if that's okay.
Burkhardt, if you have any comments right now.
I'm here in the Zoom meeting, Leanne. So this is good news because I had actually last week and this week had to call the police 17 times already, just because of parking violations in front of the two properties in discussion. And this is really a big challenge because my son is now driving a car as well. He's a good driver, professional driver, but he is sometimes not able to leave our driveway because there's no visibility at all. So I highly appreciate that if we get a no parking sign up there.
Yep. So Mr. Burkhardt, I will follow up with you via email just to explain the next steps. I'll do that tomorrow.
Okay, very good, Leanne. Thank you.
My apologies for the waiting room issue.
The last item on our agenda for Public Works this evening is for Lake Drive pedestrian.
Again, a traffic and parking regulation request. I think you're, the request, if you don't mind, I'll just simply state, it is to install, excuse me, typical pedestrian crosswalk signage at each of the marked intersections along Lake Drive. Staff recommends your favorable consideration of that request. As noted, the cost for the signage is significantly greater than our annual operating signage budget. However, there is available monies from the traffic and parking study recommendation implementation that remain and are available for this work. So with village, if you favorably recommend to the village board and village board approves, then we will place order for the signage and install as soon as practical.
Yeah, same here. You know, anytime it comes down to a decision that's about keeping people safe, I think that's what we need to do. So to me, this makes a lot of sense, you know, similar to the previous item. I see this happen. I've had it happen just like everybody else has. Anything we can do to make people more safe when they're crossing the road is what we need to do.
You know, it's not every day we get have a fact that can affect me. So today, with all of these approvals, I think makes this job a lot more exciting to be approving a recommendation. Interact with our. I guess my only question, Lee, have this project money earmarked for. Have to raise money for.
This will comfortably fit in the available balance.
How about the solar beacon?
I can look into that. I don't know that would necessarily be considered a recommendation from the traffic and parking request, though I don't have every word of that deck. So,
We'll figure it out.
possibility.
We'll dig in. There. We'll figure it out.
Possibility.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion at this time. Unless the
No, I mean, again, Gary Bronk, 1827 East Canmore Place. No, I appreciate the support. Obviously, there was some urgency to this because summer's coming up, traffic crossing, especially going to the beach. We know what it's like. And when there's all those cars parked along, especially, I mean, Jarvis is the one intersection that we're most concerned. Because not only are there cars parked along there, but also as you're going north there, so it does a little curve. I don't think we put this in the request. We'd actually thought about asking, and I don't think it was very specific, again, that there be an advanced pedestrian signage sign there, not just at the crosswalk. This gives sort of a heads up that there was a crosswalk coming. I don't know whether that's possible, but that was our big concern. But we're concerned about all of them, and I'm glad that you're supporting this. It's just part of long-term kind of trying to raise awareness. And this request is done jointly with the.
Yeah, we like to call ourselves a walkable community, so. I'd like to make a motion.
I can make a motion. Sorry, mute a notification here. Okay, I move that the Public Works Committee recommend the installation of pedestrian crossing signage at all marked crosswalks on North Lake Drive within the village of Shorewood.
Second. Aye.
Aye.
Pretty, that's all we got tonight for Public Works.
Motion to adjourn.
Aye.
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 Okay, calling the village board to order at 7:35. Welcome, everybody. Thank you in advance for your time, talent, and patience. Before we get started, I'd like to offer a moment of silence in recognition of lives lost and harmed due to gun violence. I know this isn't typical, but it just seems like a particularly heavy time and an appropriate way to start. Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Sorry. Moving on, where's my agenda? We would like to do a roll call. Oh, actually, I can just say all trustees are present and accounted for except for trustee Arndorfer, who is excused.
Okay.
Thank you. And has this meeting been noticed?
The meeting has been noticed and posted according to law.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 4, special of order of business, proclamation for National Police Week. As we express appreciation for the sacrifice that members of law enforcement take each day for the safety of others, I want to recognize the loss of Aaron Salter, a security officer who attempted to stop the Buffalo shooting and lost his life. I also want to acknowledge the professionalism of the Buffalo Police Department as they acted quickly to prevent further harm and death. Now turning to the Shorewood Police Department, I offer this proclamation and I'm confident that my colleagues share these sentiments. This is the first time that we've observed this occasion, and so because of that and the ongoing conversations we've had in the community, I wanted to prepare a memo to kind of create some framing around that. At this time, I will read the proclamation. What page is it on?
20.
120?
The actual proclamation.
Oh, right.
21.
Thank you. Just click the link. You make it sound so easy, Arthur. Okay. It didn't work. Yes, it did.
21.
Okay, thank you. We've also included the press release that was sent out, and there were, I believe, 2 TV stations interviewed with Chief Worth. There might have been other coverage that I didn't see. And the proclamation is as follows. To recognize National Law Enforcement Memorial Week 2022. Whereas in 1962, President Kennedy proclaimed May 15th as National Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the calendar week in which May 15th falls as the National Law Enforcement Memorial Week. Whereas established by a joint resolution of Congress in 1962, National Law Enforcement Week pays special recognition to those officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty for the safety and protection of others. Whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. Whereas the Village of Shorewood recognizes the risk and sacrifice required to perform public safety duties 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Whereas the Village of Shorewood appreciates that the members of the Shorewood Police Department use the greatest level of care and caution during each call for service in order to protect the safety of every member of the community. Whereas the Village of Shorewood values that the Shorewood Police Department has willingly collaborated in what is recognized as an ongoing process to communicate with community stakeholders about the role of law enforcement in the village's desire to serve residents, visitors, and employees in an equitable manner. Whereas the Village of Shorewood encourages the community to join the members of the Shorewood Police Department in this solemn week of national honor by expressing thanks in writing and in person. Whereas in 2022, the National Law Enforcement Memorial Week formally runs May 11th to May 17th. Whereas the service and sacrifice of all officers killed in the line of duty will be honored during the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund's 34th Candlelight Vigil on the evening of May 13th, 2022. Whereas May 15th is designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all fallen officers and their families, and U.S. flags should be flown at half-staff. Therefore, be it resolved that the Village of Shorewood will observe May 11 through 17th, 2022 as National Law Enforcement Memorial Week in the Village of Shorewood and publicly salutes the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation. Thank you very much. And at this time, if there are any members of the department who are here that would like to speak on the occasion, you are welcome to do so. We appreciate you, and I'm sorry that it was not done in the past, but we're starting a new tradition. I look forward to. I'm glad. Are there any members of the board who would like? Oh, go, please, Chief Worth.
On behalf of the entire department, I just want to say thank you, President McKay.
Yeah, that one.
I just want to say, on behalf of the department, I just want to thank you, President McKay, you, Manager Ewald, just for taking the time to understand what this week means to us and the importance of this week, and then formally recognizing it with a proclamation. Many of the members of the Shorewood Police Department have been personally impacted by the loss of officers within the Milwaukee County area, myself included. And while we consider this to be a very solemn week, while we respect, honor, and remember those officers that have fallen, it's also a time to celebrate the lives that they lived and how they died. So we in law enforcement do our duty with the utmost diligence, care, and concern for the safety of our public, of this village, and across the country, understanding that we may ultimately make that sacrifice and pay the price, but we do it in service to this village. So I just like to say thank you for taking the time to recognize this week and the importance of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the board who would like to be heard?
I'll make it brief. I just want to say, thank you for your service. You guys are some of the best officers in all of this Milwaukee. You do such a fantastic job, and you don't get nearly the recognition you deserve. But believe me when I tell you, the residents that I talk to are very proud to have you as their police force. And I can't thank you enough for everything. So thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, are there any members of the public on the Zoom who would like to be heard on this matter? No, I don't think we have any members of the public. Okay, thank you. Any members of staff? Okay, I think we've said it all. Thank you. Good luck. Hope it's a safe night.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.
All right. Thank you all. Moving on to 4B, present the 2022 CAFR report, audit reports. Mr. Berg from Sikich.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it. Can you all hear me?
Yep. Yes, we can.
Okay. Always got to check, make sure I unmuted. Thanks for having me. Please feel free to interrupt with any questions you might have about the process or the documents you have before you. I'm mostly here to answer any questions, but I'll make a quick presentation as well to let you know primarily that the audit went very, very smoothly. We had a planning meeting back in November to meet with staff to make sure we understood and agreed on the audit schedule, the timing, documents required, all that kind of stuff. Then we did our preliminary field work in late November on the 29th and 30th. This year, we actually came on site for a little bit, as opposed to the last 2 years where we were primarily remote. So we spent about a half a day on site for preliminary field work and about a day in mid-March for the actual testing. And again, the audit went very smoothly. We're able to complete all of our testing exactly on time as we scheduled it. Mark did a terrific job and his staff getting ready for us, posting things to our portal where it's a secure portal where the clients are allowed to or encouraged to post all the items that we need. And then of course we have a list of that there, but we also try to surprise our clients a little bit to make it a little bit more random in the audit process as we're required to do. We want to make sure that we give adequate kudos to both village staff and our team for getting the report out exactly on time, to get the draft out. Mark wrote the report, we edited it, and the result of that you have before you is a comprehensive report, which means that it includes an introductory section as well as a statistical section. That's over and above what is required by the state of Wisconsin, the government finance officers. It's what's required by the Government Finance Officers Association, but those two additional sections of the report are not required by GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, or by the Government Accounting Standards Board. This is to give the reader more information, more background information. The statistical section is generally on a 10-year basis. So the reader, the user could get a little more information and see some trends. It's a fairly intimidating document. It never seems to get shorter, only seems to get longer. And I know it's an intimidating document. So I would encourage you to start with the letter of transmittal on pages 1 and 3, written by staff. It is designed to be the introductory letter to this document. And then comes our opinion. After our opinion is the management discussion and analysis on pages 9 through 23. Again, this is written by staff and it compares last year to this year and attempts to explain the reasons for changes between the 2 years, the results of operations, and also gives a little hint of what to expect in the future, some expectations. It also touts some of the village's accomplishments for the year. And then, of course, the statistical section. The opinion that we rendered for this report is commonly referred to as a clean opinion. We call it an unmodified opinion. It's the best opinion we're allowed to give, and it simply says that financial statements present fairly in all material respects. I also wanted to point out that the fund balance for the general fund exceeds the minimum the policy for fund balance that the village set at a minimum of 30% of annual expenditures. It's nearly 40% this year. So the village is adhering to its own policies and exceeding them. We also, in addition to the annual comprehensive financial report, or ACFR for short, we also issued a board communication. That communication is very thin, which is a good thing. It would be thicker if we had a lot more journal entries or comments and recommendations for improvement. We found no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, which we would be required to report to the board, but we didn't find any. We had no new comments whatsoever. And we just simply updated the status of the old comments, which primarily have to do with segregation of duties in the village's limited staffing. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the documents you have before you, about the process, or anything else that might be on your mind this year.
I'll open it up to trustees at this time. Trustee Kudo.
So as it relates to the segregation of payroll duties, is that something that has always been the case in Shorewood, and it's just a matter of us not having enough FTEs to cover that responsibility?
That has been the case for the years that I have done the audit for the village, correct? Yes.
So for new trustees, Mark, is there anything you want to, any context you want to give on that?
The only thing that I would like to add is that compare this above and beyond minimum requirements, transparency, board, public record, documents posted on the website, also common reference, bond rating agency. That's another. Compare this document above and beyond what's statutorily required. And pretty stable environment forward. There's always something that way.
Thank you. Trustee Ursing.
Well, I'd just like to take a moment to commend Mark on his work. I think it's you doing fantastic work here, and this just speaks volumes to what you're bringing to the village. So thank you so much for everything that you do.
Great. Thank you for mentioning that. All right. And this is not slated for action this evening. Are there any other further comments or questions? All right. Thank you for your time, Mr.
Thank you. And I always remind my village boards that I work with staff, but I work for the board. So if anything should come up that you would like to pose a question to me about anything regarding the audit, I'd be happy to take your call or email or however you want to get a hold of me. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Take care.
All right. Moving on to item 5, consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Motion by trustee Ursing, seconded by trustee Moore Baldoff. Any discussion? Trustee Stokebrand.
I'm missing the minutes.
Correct. They were not included in this agenda. They will be placed on the next agenda. Thank you.
Trustee Kudo.
If I wanted to pull something.
Mhm. Yes.
Item.
Okay. Item 5E. Anything else? All right, friendly amendment to approve the consent agenda with the exception of 5E.
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. So moving on to item 6, items removed from the consent agenda. Item 5E, trustee Kudo, consider application for special privilege approval for a loading zone at Metro Market 4075 North Oakland Avenue. Trustee Kudo.
I'm just wondering if there's any more information. Give me a moment. I'll text her.
Director Griepentraub, do you want to comment?
I could not hear anything. Trustee Kudo was speaking. I couldn't hear any of the comments.
Hey Bart, it's Eric.
Hi.
I'm just
Hi.
looking for some context. Obviously, that's a really busy block. So I'm wondering, why they believe that they need a designated loading zone.
So this is something that the Metro Market has had since it's been opened. It previously was part of the village code as a permanent loading zone. But in 2018, the village board changed the permanence of loading zones to be an annual renewal so that trustees could review and comment on whether or not they're being utilized in the proper fashion. So they've applied to simply keep what they have out there currently. It would be at the village board discretion to not approve that or to perhaps modify hours or things of that nature if they felt as though, that wasn't necessary. But they have had this, I think, for the past, 5 or 6 years within this current condition. So if the board would like to discuss modifying it, I'm more than happy to entertain that, but I don't have any particular suggestions or comments with respect to a modified loading zone, but they do use this for where their trucks stage before they back into the loading zone off of Kenmore. So it is on the side street. Just to clarify the location of it.
Yeah, so if you scroll down, you can see the picture of.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not a new loading zone. It's an existing loading zone on the side street of Kenmore, if that helps.
Yeah, and it aids in general operation of
Gotcha.
yeah, sorry, my phone's on. Any other discussion or trustee
Clarify
Stoker?
then, the 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. is the time when no parking is allowed because it's their exclusive use. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, would anyone like to make a motion either to approve or deny the request?
I'll move to approve the request.
Second.
Okay, motion by trustee Kudo, seconded by trustee Stokebrand. Any further discussion? I'll just say thank you for taking it out since you had questions. Appreciate that. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries and privilege is approved. Moving on to item 7, public hearings, of which there are none. Item 8, citizens to be heard. Are there any citizens to be heard this evening? I don't think we've got anybody. Okay. Item 9, new business. 9A, consider award of contract for 2022 ash removal program. Director Bushlick.
Thank you. The 2022 budget includes an allocation of funds for the removal of up to 75 ash trees. Previous board members, non-new board members, not sure what the proper terminology is, will recall our discussion last year regarding ash service levels. That was based on an analysis that was completed by the Davie Resource Group that reviewed the village's emerald ash policy, replacement program, resources, and other needs. And one of the primary recommendations that came out of that study was for a more aggressive removal of ash trees within the village's street tree population. You may recall that the level of service that was identified as preferred was labeled medium. And under that level of service, village staff will continue to treat certain categories of ash, typically our larger ash. And the recommendation suggested that the village, as I mentioned, be more aggressive on its removals of ash from our population. You may recall during discussion or have heard in many conversations outside this room, in the media and other places, emerald ash borer is 100% fatal to our native ash. Without our intervention, every ash will eventually die of this disease or some other native borer. But we are working very hard to diversify our species. And our goal really is to manage this issue, this infestation that we have. And we do have emerald ash present in the village. So the contract before you this evening is for the removal of up to 75 ash trees. You will notice that there are two alternatives. The only proposal that we got for removal of the trees was greater than the allocated funding. So the options that we're presenting to you would be to award the contract in the amount of the proposal and use capital reserves to make up the difference. Or alternatively, you can approve the contract amount at, I'm sorry, was it 200 or at $75,000, and staff will remove a tree or trees based on the discretion of the arborists to make sure that that contract total comes in below $75,000. And both of those motions are outlined in the memo.
Okay, we'll open it to questions. Trustee Moore-Balda.
My question is, so, obviously, I think it's important that we move forward here. And given that there is not a significant difference in the cost, and it sounds like we could absorb it. I'm curious, how much staff time would this take? Because I would hate to have staff spend time to study which trees to remove, and we just end up like breaking even, and we could have just had the trees removed. So, if it's just like hey, we could look at a piece of paper and somebody could immediately say, this one and this one can wait. I would assume they've got to get out and look at the trees.
They've been reviewing these trees. They put this list together. They reviewed them again this spring. They marked them this spring. So I think it really would be a relatively quick process. My only comment to that would be, it's not going to go away.
Right.
It
It'll
just
have to
means
get
we'll
removed
do
at some
less
point.
next year.
Right. Well, that said, I would be in favor of option 2, but obviously other people have questions and comments.
You're welcome to make a motion if you want.
I'll let others address their issues
Other
first.
question, Trustee Ursink.
Sure. Is this an annual contract then? So maybe next year we get a couple other, people that bid on the contract?
The board directed staff to proceed with this program with the understanding that it would be 3 years.
Okay.
The 3 years at $75,000 each year. The contract is awarded annually. So in 2023, we'll be having this same discussion. Maybe a different contract, or maybe the same contract, or maybe several next year.
Right. So that's my question, that, with pricing going up, this could be, seeing we only had one contract this year, we're kind of locked into that 79 number if we decide to go with this company, or, we could vote for 75,000. But what's to say like next year it's 85,000 or it's 80,000, or we get a couple different quotes. One is at 75,000, so is that a possibility for next year that we could have 2 different bids on this project from another company?
I would hope so.
Okay. Fantastic. And then do you have any clue, because right now it's 75 trees that we're looking to take down. If we just go with the 75,000 as opposed to the 79,000, what does that average out tree wise? How many trees would we?
Right now, apologize. I didn't. So we identified 75 trees.
About $1,000.
It, a little over, right? So what I would ask the arborists to do is go back and look and determine which, if any, of these trees pose the most immediate hazards and make sure that they stay on the list. And then they would probably pull one or two that they thought, maybe we're on the bubble. And those would be held for a future year.
Sure. I'd be in favor of supporting the 79,000. But if you wanted to take my tree off the list this year, I could, we could keep it for one more. Just
Point taken, noted. Any other discussion? Trustee Stokebrand.
So did I read somewhere that some of the trees are not taking chemical anymore?
That is correct. So those would stay on the list. Or
So if
removal.
they're not, treating them is doing no good, right?
We're unable to treat them.
Oh, I see.
They will physically not pull the chemical into their vascular system.
And are they finding, as we treat this more and more, that this is more and more common? So we might end up-
we are finding that. I haven't been able to find a lot of research or articles written related to that, but what we are finding, so in the course of the treatment, what happens is we actually drill a hole into the tree and there is a plug that's tapped in that's plastic. It's kind of like an IV port, I guess, the best analogy I have. And then there's a gun that uses pressure tanks to push the chemical into the tree, and then the tree will pull it up through its vascular system. What we have been, and after we leave, the plugs stay in if we can't get them out, and the tree will scar over. And you have to create these access points at a certain height above ground level. So we go 1 year, we go 3 years later and drill a new set of holes. Eventually, at that point above ground level, the tree is completely scarred over and you cannot drill new access points. So we have to either go lower or higher, which slightly impacts the benefits or the to the tree, its ability to pull the chemical. So we are finding that there's a limited lifespan for treating. It's not something that, well, it was never intended to be done indefinitely, but we're finding that physically it's not possible to do it indefinitely.
Okay, and then it just, when I did the quick math there, it looked like eventually we'd be treating all the trees we have left.
That is, that would be the
Almost,
outcome of
with,
this.
Within about
Yes.
50 trees.
Yep. So when we initially started this program, we identified the largest trees for treatment for a couple reasons. Obviously, those are the ones that tend to be, most dear to people. But from a resource perspective and a fiscal perspective, they're also the most expensive to remove. And what we want to do is make sure that we are removing them on our schedule, not Mother Nature's. Once a tree dies, it becomes more dangerous, more difficult, more expensive to remove. If we can remove a tree, either we never want to remove it, in its prime or while it's still living. But if we can get that tree, as it starts the downward decline, we can remove it much more safely, much more inexpensively and efficiently. When they get too far gone, they pose big safety concern.
I just have one more question. So we only put this out as a 1-year contract. We didn't ask for a 3-year.
We did not.
Is there a reason, like next year, could we go? Is it,
Because it's difficult to tell at this point what the condition of those trees exactly might be next year. We may have we wouldn't have
It's a
an
moving
entirely
target.
different list, but it's a bit of a moving target.
thank you.
Trustee Kudo.
Speaking to this, may I ask, what happens after removal and what's the disposal process? I mean, is there anything we can do to cycle or use these trees for anything else, or because they're contaminated, we have to destroy them?
No, we actually do currently we've done different things in my time here with the department. Currently, the trees go to a couple of different places. Primary ones are a facility in River West that utilizes the wood for a number of different purposes. And we have also donated trees to, I should remember the name, but there is an organization, I believe it's also located in River West, that uses more what I would call specimen type ash trees for furniture or other types of unique treatments, which is kind of cool, I think, rather than having it used for firewood. But there are a couple different avenues that we use to dispose of the trees. Thus far, we have not had to pay for any of that disposal, and that's always my goal.
But there's no potential revenues either, right?
If we had space to store, market, that sort of thing, that may be an option. It's pretty time intensive to do that. You have to store it. You have to work through avenues, mechanisms for sale of that wood. At this point, we don't have the capacity to do that, I think. So I'm always very happy we can, like I said, dispose of it at no cost to the village.
Okay, thanks.
And there's no environmental risk of spreading the disease or anything like that by?
At this point, it's been found in every county within
Awesome.
the region. So the moratoriums on moving ash have been
Oh,
lifted.
Okay.
When it's chipped, there are specific dimensions that we look for to prevent moving the larva. One of our chippers does comply with those dimensions. One of them does not. But it's really less of a concern than it maybe was 10 years ago, because we just give it back and forth to our neighbors.
And then all trees are replaced. They're a new tree that's disease resistant is put in a place.
That is our goal.
Yeah.
Years ago, we were able to do that immediately, the same season, with the volume of trees we're removing. Now we are not quite on we remove it in 22, it goes back in 22. We are able to do that with the majority of them, but as we ramp up this process to remove and replace far more than we ever have in the past, we are seeing a lag of a year in some areas, where we'll remove it in 22 and we'll replant in 23.
Is that replacement plan something that's like outlined somewhere as to like how you choose a tree and things like that to replace it with?
I would say generally that one of our certified arborists will make that selection, and that's very site specific.
Okay.
It's based on what other trees exist on the block. We're trying very hard to diversify species.
Okay.
It's also based on the existence of underground and overhead utilities and other conditions. If there's a significant amount of trees, private property trees, and they will look for something that might be a bit more shade tolerant. It's just, there's nothing specifically laid out. It's all.
But an arborist makes the decision. It's not
Yes,
just.
absolutely. It's not me.
Oh, well, not that it wouldn't be, but.
All right, well, we've gone a little far afield of contract awarding, but I think it's a good, because this is a program that, we've been, as you could see from all the dates that were included in the memo, it's been on our agenda for quite a while. So with that, I would ask for a motion at this time. Trustee Stokebrand.
I move that a contract for the 2022 ash removal be awarded to Wallace Tree and Landscape in the amount of $79,592.
Second.
Okay, motion by trustee Stokebrand, seconded by trustee Ursink. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much. 9B, consider affirming Village Board Lake Drive roadway design. Manager Ewald?
Yep.
Included within your packet was a review of where we've been discussing, and previous boards have discussed the design of Lake Drive. At our last meeting that occurred on May 2nd, it was the desire of the board to list this again on the agenda as we now have a new board composition to affirm the prior positions the board has taken with regard to Lake Drive design. And that is to reconstruct Lake Drive in the current formation that it has currently existed since for the last couple of years. So I bring this to you. We are happy to execute that within a letter and make that available to also the public, letting them know that the board, if the board so chooses, that the preferred design, the current design of the board is staying consistent with the new composition of this village board. And then we would execute that and send that to those team members at the DOT.
All right, I would take any questions or a motion at this time. We're being asked, the motion is outlined in our memo.
I'd make a motion.
Great.
I move to affirm the village board's previous guidance to maintain the current typical cross-section and the reconstruction design of Lake Drive, which includes shared parking and bike lanes on both sides of the roadway and safe travel lanes.
Second.
Okay. Motion by trustee Moore Baldoff. I heard trustee Stokebrand second, with a third by trustee Kudo. Any further discussion? What's that? Oh, and also fourth by trustee Lynn?
No.
Oh.
Getting ready.
Oh, do you have a?
Nope.
No. Okay. Any further discussion? Yes.
I'd just like to thank staff for bringing this up for us again, and I hope that it garners some attention at the state level, because I think the final design will be done this fall. Is that correct? The time is.
Yeah, so they're currently working to finalize schedule for a second public information meeting. Every time I have this conversation, I am told that the final cross-section designs will be determined following that public information meeting and the additional feedback from stakeholders and the general public. But yes, the intent is to have a final design selected prior to the end of the calendar year.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much. Coming to our last item of new business is 9C, review of the long-range plan projects and associated timeline. So this item is coming before us today as kind of an overview in case you have questions about the projects that are included in the long-range plan. The plan will come back to us for additional consideration in June, it is. Right, so there's no action required this evening. So with that, how would staff like to proceed?
I'll intro and then I'll turn it over to Mark,
Okay.
who's going to kick us off, and then Leanne, who's going to go through each project. Wanted to give all board members some context to why we do what we're doing this evening. In past years, we've attempted to do this all in one night, and it tends to be a longer night because we can definitely have questions about different projects and those components and how they fit together. So what we try to do with the board is go through those project descriptions, just to simply understand what we're trying to accomplish and why we're trying to do that on the timeline that is proposed within the scope of the plan. So we're here tonight not to make any decisions. The projects that you see included are not new to the LRP. They have been in there with the exception of a new sheet included for placeholder of funds for Public Works facility. So we're going to go through those this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and he's going to kick us off.
And I should also say we don't have to you don't have to decide whether you support things, or it's really just sort of a technical overview of what's in it, right? And
Correct.
then questions, technical questions for Leanne.
I'll just add a couple more comments. This is effectively Appendix A to the long-range financial plan, which outlines, seen the first.
Yep. There you go.
So this is Appendix A to the long-range financial plan, which outlines the current project schedule, current estimates of probable cost to the best of our ability. A lot of these projects are interrelated. There's capacity issues for how much work can get done in any one season. What we try to do is to go through this because these dollar amounts in this schedule is really what feeds into the analytical portion of the long-range plan that gives the board an opportunity to see what the impacts of implementing the projects as identified in this plan will be over the next 10 years. So this really just gets us off the deck, let you know what's coming and what any updates were. Again, the only thing that was added is a placeholder for prospective public works facilities improvements. That will give the board the ability to see the impact of that as a placeholder and give them some context to make future decisions when we do present the financial analytics of the plan. And with that, really just talking about the projects themselves, Leanne is here to engage in that discussion.
All right. Are there questions from the trustees or are there certain, oh, you were just going to go through each plan, each schedule, or I mean, each project, and then we could take questions at that time?
However you'd like to do it. I don't intend to give a great deal of detail.
Mhm.
It's more just a project overview, maybe one or two high points.
Okay. Well, I think I'd like to go project by project just because not with a deep dive, but just to keep the question and topics focused. So what's our first project, Leanne?
So the first project listed in your implementation schedule is alley reconstruction. As you know, we're doing a very large alley project this year, 2022. That project is a double project. Earlier iterations of the financial plan identified alley work at a $750,000 funding level. The 2022 alley project is actually previously imagined as the 2025 alley project, which was a combination of the 23 and 25 projects, but with the shuffleboard that is Oakland Avenue, this project was moved to 22. So we're doing a total of 11 alleys. Some of those have green infrastructure enhancements. You may recall that the village previous practice, not a written policy, but a applied practice, is to use available Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District green infrastructure funding to add green infrastructure enhancements in the separated sewer area, which is where we receive credit toward our TMDL compliance. There's a stormwater improvement. The next alley project is anticipated to be scheduled for 2027.
Any questions about alley reconstruction? Okay. I think we might have missed the local road program on page 247.
You're right. I apologize. So the local road program is really the title that we've given to what I would consider to be reconstruction of our residential streets. Previously, the village board adopted a pavement management program. That program viewed the village's transportation infrastructure in three components: road reconstruction, major road maintenance, and alley reconstruction and maintenance. So the local road program would incorporate the first of those components, which is road reconstruction. That has previously been imagined and implemented as even year programs. So reconstruction entails the complete removal of the current road surface and subbase and a rebuild of that subbase and road. We are utilizing the Southeast area combined sewer improvements to reconstruct much of the roadway in the Southeast area over the next several years. There is some precedent for that. The village also applied road reconstruction and sewer improvement similarly in 2012 and 2014 in the Northwest area. But typically, we will use even calendar years to reconstruct roadways. Odd calendar years are then reserved for major maintenance. So mill and overlays, of which you will be seeing more in the next decade to two, because we really are coming to a point where much of our reconstruction has been achieved, and now we're moving into a phase of more major maintenance. So rather than a reconstruct, we can just remove the roadway surface and replace that. The underlying base and many of the curbs and the ancillary infrastructure can remain intact. So that becomes a very different process, much less expensive, much easier on the residents, and much easier for us to manage. So we're looking forward to that.
Questions about local road program, and congratulations on seeing the horizon. Okay, hearing none. We can move over. Oh, question, is Downer included in the Southeast area?
Yes. Yes, Downer will be part of phase 2, which is scheduled for 2024.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Trustee Ursink.
Will the laterals that we were talking about earlier, will that be a part of maybe this when we start to replace these roads? That's going to be a very similar schedule.
So as we mentioned earlier, next year is a huge opportunity for us to start biting off, what we can on our lead service line replacement. I think preliminary counts, we have probably approaching a couple hundred lead service municipal services that we would intend to replace with water main replacement. In the past, we've utilized service records, age, and other inventory aspects to determine whether water main needs to be replaced when we reconstruct a roadway. We haven't automatically done that. Going forward, it's been staff's recommendation that if we are reconstructing a roadway, we, in most cases, ought to replace the water main. And all of the planning that we have done to date for Southeast area sewer, all of the cost estimates that have been generated to date incorporate all water main and service replacement.
Thank you.
Possibly 200 homes starting next spring.
Approaching 200. I apologize, I don't recall the exact amount. It's more than 100 and less than 2. How about that?
Other questions? Okay. What's next?
Next item is the village's sidewalk program. Many years ago, this was an annual program. It was switched to a biannual program, maybe 10 years or so ago. And we do this program in odd calendar years, historically, traditionally, since the switch. And that's really been a workload issue. The road reconstruction programs are pretty, trying to think of word that's better than taxing on our department. They require a lot of time, a lot of manpower. So we try to balance those. So a road reconstruction program will be typically scheduled for an even calendar year when we have options, right? And then odd calendar years, we will tend to do more, but smaller in scale programs. So alley programs, mill and overlay programs, and the sidewalk program. Our last program was done in 2021 in the far northwest area. Need to put my glasses on. Actually, southwest area, my apologies. So we will be skipping 2023 for a couple of reasons. One of them being workload spread. The other is that the area that we come up on next is the southeast area. And you can only squeeze so many contractors into an area at one time. So we really need to defer that program. So 2025, we would again be potentially looking at a sidewalk program. Those of you tenured board members, that's the word I was may recall that we had some discussions regarding funding options for that program in the past. And I would expect as we approach that 2025, we will have that conversation again regarding whether that continues to be the village's only special assessment. Questions about the sidewalks? Yes, trustee Kudo.
I'm sorry, I'm the only one asking questions, but, oh, Arthur.
I got it.
On here, it says all public sidewalks and carriage walks are reviewed. Who does the review of those?
Most recently, it's been the village and consulting engineer. Previously, it had been a member of my staff, oftentimes an intern type position. Prior to that, it was many years ago, it was run out of the building inspection department in Village Hall.
Okay, and the reason I ask is, and I don't know if there's any foundation to the argument, but I've heard folks that have concerns over replacement versus shaving or stuff like that. And I don't know the validity of those concerns. But
So the shaving or the grinding is, we incorporated that into our last two programs. So that's relatively new. The first year that we did it, I'll just say we learned.
Okay.
I think it went much better in last year. It has its place. It's not applicable in all situations. But I would foresee that our department would continue to recommend that as a component of any sidewalk program.
Great, thank you.
My question for you, Leanne, is, based on 2021, I was part of the quadrant that had the shaving done. And I'd have to say that, there's a lot of really kind of bad grinding areas. Like I think my house was maybe the first house to be grinded down, and there's just big gouges, and there's, it's the quality of the grinding was not great. Will we be looking for different contractors? Will be,
So was that last year or 2 years ago?
it was the last, I think it was the last cycle that,
So last year.
yeah, I think so, right? I mean, I think we did this 2 years ago. I don't remember anybody doing this last
So
year.
if you told me that you were in the 2019 program and the work was not of a quality you would expect, I would 100% agree with you. Like I said, we learned a lot, and particularly about what type of contractors should be doing that work. Last year, the contract was issued to a firm who, that's what they do.
Sure.
Much better job, much better results, far more efficient, far less expensive than the way we implemented it the first year.
Got it. And from an aesthetic perspective, I don't know if the grinding kind of weathers after a while, but I mean, the big grinding marks throughout the village just kind of aesthetically aren't as pleasing as replacing these slabs. But, I'm sure the cost is significant from grinding to replacement.
Well, it's significant to the property owner because the village covers the cost of grinding is not specially assessed because it's technically not an improvement to the property.
Mhm.
It's a maintenance item. So the village covers the cost of the grinding or the shaving, whereby the replacement is an improvement and is therefore is eligible for special assessment. And as I mentioned, historically, that has been the one item that the village has specially assessed.
So if we did make a policy decision and moved it to the tax rolls, then we could make more of a policy decision around what to do. And I think in the past, we did not shave because of the aesthetic, but then there was kind of a move towards that.
You know,
to
there are some people
incorporating
that
it.
like it.
Yep.
I've had people call me and say they find it to be a piece of art. You know, so-
Are you-
All right,
I mean,
we're
are
getting.
you
No way.
volunteering to- If you'd
Yeah.
like, I'm sure they could come.
I mean,
and
in-
replace
I
yours.
will say.
I think
in
we're getting
s-
out of scope
yeah.
here, but anyway.
It can look interesting using the right equipment when it's done well.
Okay.
I would just say
I'll
too,
give you
that we, the pedestrian bike safety committee a few years ago was the one who kind of worked through this and recommended that we do the shaving. And we had lengthy discussions about that at the time because it is not the prettiest thing, but it is a safety thing. Particularly, it was recommended to us by some blind residents who indicated that it gets the job done that they need to just not have a lip.
Yeah.
Yeah, much quicker than waiting until 2031 when the next, that quadrant's done. So
Much appreciated. Thank you. All right. I think we've cooked that goose. All right. Oakland Avenue.
So as you all know, we are in the process of conceptual design for Oakland Avenue, which is currently scheduled for 2025. Had been shifted from an original 2022 schedule. We are in the process of scheduling a special meeting of the Public Works Committee to work on work through those design concepts on a block by block basis. And construction is anticipated for 2025. It will include replacement of water main and services for the length of the corridor. And that's the high points of that. We'll be working, I should say that the goal is to have design complete at the end of this year or relatively so that the important components can be transmitted to the Business Improvement District to allow them ample time to plan and do whatever work or events they deem necessary to help the business community through that construction season.
And obviously this project is more familiar to everyone because we've just been talking about it in terms of design. Any questions? All right, street lighting box.
So there are several boxes, or more appropriately, control cabinets that power various circuits of our streetlight system. Have been working to replace these systematically over the last probably decade, or maybe not quite. The boxes have a finite life. They are all at the end or beyond their book life. So we are attempting to be relatively proactive in their replacement. The most recent replacement, there was a contract issued, I believe it was for last year, for the replacement of the cabinet that's located on the Lake Bluff School grounds. Due to the infamous supply chain issues, we have been unable to make that replacement, and in fact have been told that the necessary components for that cabinet as designed are not expected for delivery this year. We are currently working through some options to see what other alternatives may be available to us. But from what I can tell very superficially is that I don't like any of the available options. So we continue to work through that and will likely at some point be coming back to you with a full report on that. But there are three, I believe, cabinets after that require replacement. And they're all located right here behind the fire station. A cabinet will serve a number of different circuits, generally in that vicinity. So these 3 cabinets here will power much of what is much of the area located east of Oakland Avenue. There is one that we have already replaced that's located adjacent to the entrance to the nature preserve. That cabinet powers the far southeast area. We've replaced some cabinets along Oakland and, like I said, and are waiting on the Lake Bluff, which powers the far northeast area.
So does the 300,000 include the last 4?
It does.
So did we budget for the one that was supposed to be done last year?
Yes, I believe that was in the 2021 budget.
So is that already, that's back into this number?
It shouldn't be, no.
So this is for the 3, about $100,000.
Typically, they run a little bit more than that. We're hoping for some economies of scale because they are all adjacent to each other, so. Trustee Kudo.
Are these control cabinets, pardon me,
Yeah.
sorry, still learning.
Okay.
Are these control cabinets the reason behind some of the streetlight outages that we're getting in various parts of the village?
Not currently, no. So
You know my next question.
I think I do, which I think leads us kind of into the next item that's listed here, which is an engineering study for our streetlight system. So our system is, I would call it relatively unusual and highly antiquated. We have a 2-phase system that is direct bury. What that means is that typically when you're talking about electricity, you will have 2 phases and a ground wire. Our system isn't grounded, which is not how you would design a system today. Sometimes we will get calls that signposts are arcing, or people will get close to a post and they'll hear a hum. What is happening there is that post has come into contact with some of the underground wire and it's carrying that charge, and you can hear it. It typically, if you touched it, you'd feel it. I doubt it would do serious harm. So that's one issue, is the system isn't grounded. The second issue is it's direct bury. So we have a pair of cable. That cable is wrapped in a protective sheath. That cable and protective sheath is probably at least 60 years old. So anytime that cabling is either disturbed or even exposed to air, that sheath will tend to disintegrate, or at the very least bend or break. When that happens and it's covered back up, anytime water gets in, it will fault. Water and electricity don't tend to play well together. So typically when we see our streetlight outage issues, they tend to occur in the spring, because we're getting massive freeze thaw cycles, and that water is finding its way into that existing cabling. We saw that happened this year. It happens every year. This is the worst year I've seen it in the time that I've been here. There's probably a couple things related to that. Murphy's Law, because our electrician retired, so the universe thought it would be a good time to play that joke. But more seriously, I think, we're just seeing more and more, I'll call it disturbance in the right of way. We have more projects going on. We have more private utility contractors. We have more contractors here adding fiber. There is constant work in the public right of way. Some of it we can regulate, not all of it we can. Even when we can, as I mentioned, anytime that cabling is exposed, even if it doesn't appear to have been damaged or broken or stretched or cracked or bent, just the sheer fact that you're exposing it to the air increases the chances that we will have a fault at a later date. So the solution there is that the cabling needs to be replaced and it needs to be put in conduit. Since I have been here, we have been working systematically toward that, although on a very small scale. When we do a road reconstruction project, we remove all of the old wiring, streetlight cabling, and install new cabling in a protective conduit, plastic conduit, which drastically reduces those things that we see. But, we've done a small percentage of the village. There's quite a bit more to do. And that's critical to addressing the outages that we saw this past spring.
But it sounds like capacity wise, we can't do it any sooner than where it's slated.
I struggle to come up with a good way to do that. As much as I would like to. It's incredibly taxing on our department. We have a limited number of people who are trained and capable to do this work. What we've also found this year is there do not appear to be any private contractors that are either interested in doing the work or capable of doing the work. Because we've had a couple of them in, and I don't think we saw any different results than we have otherwise. So I'd like to say, sure, I just don't know how to do it with the level and intensity and scope of the projects that we have coming up. This rivals any of them, and I don't know how we can add it to the list any quicker than we have it scheduled.
Thank you. Trustee Ursing, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just going back to the cabinet. At the end of this, it says implementation of LED street lighting system will impact the design and function of these cabinets. If we as a board have the discussion and want to go in the direction of LED lighting, how does that change all of this, especially the $100,000 cabinets that we're about to buy?
So what we worked a lot of hours in on the design of the Lake Bluff cabinet for that very reason. Want to do everything we can to make sure that we are not creating something that would be obsolete at a point in the future when the village decides, if in fact it decides it wants to convert the system to LED. But we're limited. I mean, there are, there's a, I'm going to call it a shell, and then there's interchangeable components within. There is nothing, or I should say, my understanding or what I've been told is there is nothing out there today that we can build that will power our current system, and you can flip a switch and it'll power an LED system. There are base
Can
components.
you say that again? Sorry.
So I can't build and install a cabinet that will work with our current system and that will also someday fully work
Got
with
it.
an LED system.
Okay.
There are components that will work with both, but I can't give you 100%.
Mhm.
So more than likely what will happen is we will install these cabinets, and a certain percentage of the components in them will have to be removed and replaced.
Okay.
I can't, on a $100,000 cabinet, I can't tell you with any certainty that, half of it'll work or 60% of it'll work. I just don't know at this
Mhm.
point.
Yeah, I just feel like with the antiquated system that we have in place, now is the time to modernize, or at least start considering the idea of modernization of LED street lighting into the village. So it'd be great to take that up at a future meeting.
And that'll be part of the engineering study, right?
That is the intent.
The conversion.
What we are hoping for is that the village board will fund an engineering study that will take, do a pretty deep dive on the existing system, what will be necessary to install an LED system, what components may work interchangeably with both systems, and then really spell out how we get from where we are to the point that we want to be, and how that can be phased or scheduled.
Got it. Thank you.
Trustee Stokbrand.
So this is a big public safety issue to me, and this is what I hear people talking about is the street lights. And so I think we need to do more sooner. If we can drop a $5 million DPW facility in 2024, and we don't even have, we have a $50,000 expenditure in 2027 to just start a street lighting study. I think we have to redo this and come up with a plan like the lead lateral, because I don't see street lighting as a public safety issue, not even in the 10-year plan beyond a $50,000 engineering study in 2027. I just think it's not, that to me has to, if I have to choose, and I don't think it's binary, but staff will tell us that's got to come before a DPW facility. It's just, I wonder, now we're going to have the, if we don't go back to daylight saving, are kids going to be walking to school in the dark for 5 months?
Noted. Other questions?
I mean, not necessarily, I mean, I would just concur. I mean, I just think that to wait 5 more years just to have this, and I understand the restrictions, right? But to wait 5 more years to have the study, and then probably wait, some period of time post study before we come up with plans and start to address this. Yeah, I don't want to speak for the police department, but certainly as a resident, having multiple blocks in pitch dark at night, I mean, there's a ton of people that walk around the village that, we're trying to be as pedestrian friendly as we possibly can. This is a major issue for me as well. I would like to see it addressed before 2027.
Yeah, I think I totally agree, but I wouldn't throw out a facility. I wouldn't say apples and oranges. I mean, you can't put those things together. The facility is a very, very important thing moving forward. So I think they're both very important, and it should be nice to figure out how we can do both.
Not to put Chief Worth on the spot, but do you have any thoughts from the department perspective since you're here?
I mean, from a law enforcement perspective or policing perspective, of course, we want more lights. We want to be visible and we want our residents to be visible and have that sense of security and safety in their neighborhoods. I unfortunately don't know enough about this project to speak to it intelligently other than, of course we want more lights, but I know Leanne wants a facility as well. So that's it.
Fair enough. All right.
I guess what my big point, one of my major points is we don't even have our hands around. We're not even close to having our heads around this. And it's such a big issue in the village. I think we've got to do better sooner.
Noted yet?
So as a matter of, and I'm new, so as a matter of curiosity, what happens next? After we say that this is a concern and we'd like, what the next step in the process?
Right. So yeah, procedurally, if somebody wanted to make a motion to reorder the schedule or something like that, when would we take that up?
Well, I think in terms of this context tonight, we're not talking implementation schedule or funding. So I would say that at your next meeting, when we talk those items.
In terms of the $21 million or something like that in this plan, $50,000 study is not going to move any needles. It's a placeholder to show what our previous commitment to street lighting and the previous priorities of the board is. Street lighting fell to 2027 for an engineering study. So it's an important issue to the community. Did the board want to engage in a study at some point in advance of that? It becomes a budgetary issue. So We will not bond for that study. It's a tax levy funded effort, so board can certainly try to advocate to incorporate that into the 2023 or 2024 budget.
So why don't we do a would you like some guidance in terms of how to prepare for, because we don't want to, what I don't want to have done is we come back to do the next talk about this and somebody makes a motion and we don't have any information about what that impact is. So there's a reason why it's in 2027 for constraints that have been identified. If it's the will of the board to, if there's enough interest in at least considering getting a study off the ground sooner, would you like that guidance so that staff can say, okay, if you want this, this is what it means, and you have to choose? If there is a choice to be, if that is required. Mark?
Yeah, and just to add, and I'll ask Leanne, I mean, our engineers don't come in and just do a study. They tend to drag
Everyone in
significant
on it.
amount of staff support and staff time, getting the information they need and the resources they need to do their analysis. So again, it's not just hiring a consultant to come in. There's a significant amount of time that staff will need to engage to make that meaningful, which is again why it was pushed to the slot that it was pushed, given the scope of everything else that staff's engaged.
Yeah, thank you for, yeah, so if we were to give guidance to staff to say, be prepared because we think someone's going to make a motion to, move this up and reorder it. The reason for doing that would be so that you could line out basically what would need to, okay, so here's what I don't want to have happen, is that the board says, we don't care if there's no time or capacity, do it anyway, find a way to do it, because that's what we've been doing for 6 years and it doesn't work. I mean, it sort of works, but internally.
No, it doesn't work.
Yeah. So actually, no, it doesn't work. So that's not something that I'm going to entertain as a chair. But if that's the will of the board, to have further discussion on whether it's possible or at what cost it's possible, then I would want to work with staff to see what kind of preparation is involved in that so that we can have that discussion. Does that make sense? Because what I'm not going to do is at the 11th hour have people saying, well, scrap DPW, well, do this, or how about this? I've been there. That is not a good decision-making style. So I guess the board needs to decide the way that the schedule is presented to us, the number of projects and how they're slated in the long-range plan is based on a number of factors, mostly which there's previous prioritization. There are other kinds of things that are related to it. It's time, it's capacity, it's engineering. It's things that are already invested in. The street lighting got pushed to 2027. Nobody's happy about that, but we've heard from staff that there's a reason for that, or a previous board. So we either sort of accept that or we look for an alternative path forward. But again, I want staff to have time to really prepare either an argument against that, or work with us on alternatives. So Trustee Erceg.
I think going through this, the long range plan here, there are a lot of very important issues, and we forget that Oakland is being reconstructed. There's a lot of things going on in the village, especially with DPW, with the facilities, and they're all very high level and they're all extremely important. So I think maybe it's more appropriate to go through this list first instead of just focusing on one of these issues, because there's a lot of very, very important issues within the upcoming sort of schedule here. So maybe at the end of it, if we still feel like street lighting was one that stuck out, that we really want to figure out how to get into a different schedule, then we can continue talking, but maybe we should just get through the whole schedule first and then figure that out if we still want to do that.
Fair. Were there other hands up? Okay, so we're going to put a pin in it and move on to the next project.
The next listed project is the Public Works Facility, which I think
We
we've
just
been
discussed.
talking about. So
Mhm.
the project implementation schedule also includes the Village Center heating, ventilating, and air conditioning system. A number of years ago, staff was asked to include a placeholder to entirely replace that system. It's ironically, well, the newest building in the village, and it also is the one that tends to give us the most problems. And so we are rapidly approaching a point in time where there's going to need to be some very significant work done on that system. So that number is included here for your consideration. There's also a placeholder for Village Hall facilities that will come out of the facility condition assessment. Too many acronyms. The HVAC system of this building also being one of the major components that we've asked them to look at. Next up is water relay projects. This actually will, like it or not, be intertwined with the lead and copper rule revisions implementation and lead service line replacement. In many communities, a service line can be replaced with no real impact to or thought related to the water main. For lots of reasons, Shorewood isn't most communities, particularly here. I'm very reluctant to move down a path where we talk about punching 24 new holes into a block of 90-year-old water main. I don't think that's a wise decision, and I don't recommend that we do that. So if we are to, in fact, be more aggressive on our lead service line replacement, we are also going to have to be far more aggressive on our water main replacement. The two here go hand in hand. So there's a large section in this plan that addresses water main replacement. As an anecdotal point, the Public Service Commission actually sets standards for the amount or percentage of your system that you are to replace on an annual basis. In all the time that I've been here, we've never even come remotely close to meeting our annual goal. So, the cost of deferred decisions.
So are we fined then or something, or?
I don't believe that they have a mechanism for fining, but it does become a consideration in future rate case discussions.
So they keep a record.
And then they can make directives related to the rate case and or make adjustments to, what you're requesting base in comparison to what they will grant.
So it factors into things that you might go before them.
That is my understanding. So I've never actually here, I've not observed a one-to-one correlation. But my understanding is that that is the card they use.
I mean, just in my workings with them, this is very, very close.
I know.
In my workings with them, they're getting very pointed in their representation that we have not been meeting standards for water main replacement, nor have we for the last 60 years. So a lot of that's due to the fact that a lot of the system was built at the same time back in the 1900s, 1920s, and now it's time. So
Everything all at once.
Seems that
So
way.
when it
What?
says water relays, that's water mains.
Yes. Another water-related project is the meter vault relocation at Oakland and Edgewood. Those of you who, again, have some tenure may recall that a couple of years ago, actually 21, we rebuilt the master meter vault on Downer Avenue. The Village of Shorewood is a wholesale water customer from Milwaukee Waterworks, and water enters our distribution system at 2 points. Those would be the points, Downer and Oakland. And there is a subterranean structure which houses those connections and the master meters, which are used for billing purposes. The village owns the structures, Milwaukee Waterworks owns the meters. The village is required to maintain those structures to an OSHA compliant current code standard. Downer is now, Oakland is not. And so we need to bring the Oakland structure up to code. Currently, it's located in the middle of the intersection, which, as you can imagine, is not ideal for anyone who might have to work there or test meters or get in and out of that vault. We would be looking to, at least preliminary thoughts, are to move that structure into Humboldt Park, where there does appear to be some room that is not completely packed with underground utilities, which the Edgewood corridor is stacked. So we would be looking to do that in 2025. Engineering work on that will start in 2024. We will likely be doing an RFP for engineering services in 23. Next up is the Southeast Area Combined Sewer Improvements, which we have talked about in relation to numerous projects this evening. That will build off the work that MMSD is currently doing in the Edgewood corridor to provide relief to our residents and our system. Lake Drive reconstruction is scheduled for 2026. That will also incorporate utility improvements. Those utility improvements will be fully funded by the Village of Shorewood. That will include a replacement of the water main and services for the length of the corridor. It will also include a combined sewer relay from approximately Shorewood Boulevard south to Lake Drive. And I believe that's the last page that I printed.
That is. Great. Any questions on anything between the end and streetlights that we went through? I think we had already talked about everything, so. All right, so in conclusion, we had 2 trustees that expressed interest in figuring out how to move an engineering study with street lighting earlier in the schedule. This is not agendaed for action this evening. What are our options procedurally? What kind of guidance would you? You want to do a straw poll to see if in majority we want some alternative come back to us? I guess I'd like to open it up to the board. Yes.
I would definitely like to understand what trade-offs would be required. I do share the safety concerns, but I also appreciate that we have a lot of other important projects and the strain on the staff. So I just would like to understand what the potential trade-offs would be if it's, I know DPW always needs more staff, but I would just encourage from my perspective, Leanne and staff to be, let us know what it's going to take, because I don't want this to just be a burden on the staff that already has so much on their plate. And that way we can make a very informed decision about what the right trade-offs are. I don't want to compromise on safety, but I also don't want to push off other projects that have a public safety impact as well.
Mhm.
So just want to understand the trade-offs.
Yeah, and we're behind on everything, but this is all deferred maintenance on a 100-year-old village. Trustee Lynn.
I agree completely. I think, it's definitely worth exploring, but something with like the streetlights, they're not out all the time. They're only out sometimes, and it's bad when they're out, but the rest of the time they're working just fine. Whereas just to use the DPW facility as an example again, that's broken all the time, so I think I'd want to see kind of what are the other priority projects, because there's some things we just can't move out of the way.
Right, yeah, I would say it would be unacceptable to me to defer the facilities any longer. That's been deferred 50 years, in my opinion. And I do have a lot of history and know the deference, the amount of deferred maintenance that's reflected in this plan that's before us, but I understand that the rest of the board doesn't. So if I'm willing to give time to achieve more understanding, it's also completely unacceptable to me to tell staff just to figure it out. That's not going to fly. So I am willing to ask staff to put together some alternatives to give more information and context as to why why it's like this. I will say that was given tonight. And so we can go over those things because I know it's a lot to take in when you get a different priority in your mind. So some of it may be repeat. I'm not asking you to revise history here, but we may need to represent how just understanding capacity, because none of us work in a Department of Public Works. Just none of us are a police officer. None of us are, director of finance, so we just might need that extra time, and I'm willing to give that on an upcoming agenda. So just as long as you guys are willing to take the time and realize that we're going to be here a little longer, or we might have to take a few more items, that's okay with me. Yes.
So the facilities condition report that was budgeted for this year and it complete, we have not seen that. So I think that it'd be important to get that back before there'd be another piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm. So we can look at whether that syncs with the timeline we're on with long-range planning, budget prep, and that assessment coming back.
Is it done or?
It is not yet complete. We're hoping to bring it to you for a final report in June. From the Public Works complex perspective, it's well, the assessment can assess the current facility. The current facility does not provide the safety nor any level of modernization of facility. We don't even have places to put additional bodies.
Right. So, I mean, the important thing is if we're not to code anywhere, obviously at the DPW, we need to do what we can to come to code, right?
Well, if your question is, might the assessment come back and make us realize that we can defer a decision about the facilities? Is that what you're?
No, I guess I just remember when we had the presentation, they said that there were code violations. And I remember thinking later, well, if there's any code violations, clearly those should be fixed immediately to be into code.
Not if we're going to invest in a new facility. I mean, at that point, why would we make these investments? Why would we put a Band-Aid on something that it's just a waste of money to a
So
certain
you're not
degree.
liable.
Well, the previous boards have deferred that maintenance, so, I mean, this isn't just something that came up overnight, but to your point, yes, we can't delay decisions that will impact that.
I think from looking at the Public Works facility, from just the structures that are there, that is just one of the liabilities you have. And I think the much larger liability you have is an employee safety. And that is far more comes from how they have to maneuver within that facility and use it in order to be able to do their jobs. So the structure is one portion. It's by all means, it could be arguable whether that's the overriding driving factor for safety. Just one, it's one element of safety.
I was just gonna say, well, I don't want to get too far off course here because we have a lot of other, this will come up over and over again, but I just am curious if there are like violations that we can't even bring into compliance over there. So I guess that's
Because
just
of
a-
the structure, right, right.
Right. So, but that's for another time.
Good point. Yeah, so I think this is a great discussion, and what I'm going to say is if it generates questions in your mind that staff would want to have time to contemplate and bring forward, information in context, even if you want to send an email right now while we're still in meeting, I would encourage that. So again, I want to be open to changing the outcome of this and taking in everybody's thoughts, but really trying to create a pretty clear scope of that discussion and how we're going to move forward. So, because it might look different for each one of us. So we just need to know what you need in order to make a decision when the time comes.
So what are we doing?
What I heard is that staff is hearing some of the thought processes of the board and that we're going to reflect on some alternatives. And they will be variable and we need some time to reflect on that. And that means that for me, this cannot just get on the calendar because it's something that we want done because we don't have capacity to do it. So there will
We don't
need
have capacity to do what?
the study.
For the street lighting.
Correct. There was some expressed desire to move this up in another year, an earlier year.
So we can't do the engineering study on the street lighting before 2027?
We're going to reflect on it.
Well, I think some of us are saying that, and I don't want to speak for you, Kathy, but I think some of us are saying that we would like to see all of the as many variables as possible and what the capacity is so that we can determine when we want the study done. And I understand there are just so many hours in the day and there's just so many staff. But I think this is important enough that I would like quite a bit more information on what it would take, what it would look like. And at this point, I'm not comfortable with an answer of we don't currently have the capacity. Maybe we need to change our focus on something. But again, that's part of, I think, what I'm at least asking for staff to go back and take a look at and come back and provide an answer for, please.
The thing that is difficult for me to understand is we dropped a $5 million DPW facility in 2024, but we can't move a $50,000 engineering study before 2027.
It's not a budgetary discussion. A study is not just a consultant coming in,
I
just what,
understand that.
right. So that's the answer. Because everything else on this schedule is a full-time load plus. And so that's.
Staff put the $5 million DPW in 2024. The village board did not do that. Correct?
Director Emanuelson.
Yeah, again, just to reflect the memo is that we did that to provide the board the fiscal impact of that in the long range plan analysis so that they can use that information as a barometer towards whatever action they want to take in the future. Without that analysis, that's one piece of information the board wouldn't have.
And as you'll recall with the presentation that we had at the last meeting, the report about the decision-making process will come to us and there are options to move forward. We haven't determined an option. If the board chooses to do nothing, for example, that 5 million, that placeholder and project associated with it will not be needed. But if we decide to take action according to the recommendations of that evaluation, then we will need that project in the schedule next year as presented, and it will take the staff, this is a project, but this is a work plan for a department. It's another way of looking at a work plan over 10 years.
Am I, just as a point of clarification to what Mark said, my understanding was that this project implementation schedule was a combination of not only fiscal matters, but also capacity matters
Yes.
from the department.
Yep.
Okay. I thought I just heard.
And impact on residents.
Okay.
In
I
terms
just
of,
wanted, because I thought I just heard Mark say that this was just, these were just numbers and they were put in. So I just want to make sure that there was coordination. I'm sure there was, but I want to make
Yeah.
sure that there was coordination between the departments, the village manager and everyone
Mhm.
else, that this isn't just a finance document. This also takes into account staff capacities
Absolutely.
and all that type of stuff.
exactly.
Okay.
Which is why, and I understand because this board wasn't together several years ago when the board looked and said, we have to do we have to do Oakland much sooner. And we need to do these roads and alleys much sooner. And so there was that long range plan was literally condensed. And so that's why I'm saying, I'm going to watch for us and I won't support that. So again, I can understand not needing more understanding, needing more context to say, what is capacity and what does that mean? And I want to support the staff to do that in a way that doesn't, that is educational and not a power struggle. Okay, so it is fine. Again, it's fine to share a priority with the board, with staff, and to try to get more information. And I want to make that happen in the fairest and most educational way possible. So I think at this point, I guess Trustee Stokebrand, you were in the middle of stating something. Okay,
Yes.
you're done.
Can I provide a?
Yes.
So I
Because
just
there's
want
going to
to,
be a reflection. That's what the response was. There's going to be staff reflection. That's where we are, right?
Mhm.
I'm just going to refer back to some of Trustee Kudo's comments and how he processed through and kind of outlined the fact that staff does need an opportunity to reflect and that it's not finite. And so when, you had kind of shared that perspective of like, well, what would those things look like? And how would that, I can appreciate that from your perspective, hearing that there's not capacity, that doesn't help you much when you're talking to other residents to really kind of understand what the issues are. So I heard if we all heard what Trustee Kudo said in terms of how we can reflect on, what that means from a capacity issue, because as President McCaig said, we don't all work in public works, right? We're not doing all those things all the time, but also to allow us to get a little bit more information, provide some education so that we can come to solutions together for how to proceed. And I think that's something we're definitely interested in doing. So in response, Kathy, if listening to how Trustee Kudo explained it, that's how I understand it. So I just wanted to clear that up so that if that is not how anyone else understood it, thank you, Trustee Kudo. That's what I'm taking away from this conversation. That's something I think that we can, of course, lean into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can respond to that.
Mhm.
That's what I think too. And we'll just work at the agendas and sort of how it works out so that we're still on track for budget decisions and projecting and all kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, these are all really, this is tough, right? But, and this is not because I tend to be overly optimistic, but I do really believe that this group, there's a reason why you guys are all here right now.
Mhm.
And it's because it's going to be a group who's going to really thoughtfully work through this, not only as the board, but also with us as the staff, so that we come to some good solutions. And so that's what we're interested in doing here. So thank you so much. Not every board can sit through and be as captivated as all of you were through each project description. Ask Leanne, she's seen it done a million times. So thanks for sticking with us tonight.
And what I heard is that there's not so much questions, technical questions about the projects. There's more sort of question around, are these in the order that are most important to this board? And that is a legitimate consideration, except when there are other factors related. So for example, if we wanted street lighting instead of the southeast sewer facilities upgrade, that would be a tough one. Right, exactly. We are, that ship has sailed. There could be other considerations like that. And so there's a reason why it was presented this way. And I think that everybody deserves to have the time that they need to understand why it's presented this way. If we deviate from this, how we do that in a thoughtful way and what it means. Again, I want to give time for that to happen. I want to give staff the time to prepare that. And I also, reflecting on what we thought the process would be, it seems like it's kind of adding a discussion point. We were going to do the long range plan in 2 nights. And maybe we'll need 3, and that's okay with me. But that's why I say I just want to work with staff in terms of the agenda setting. And I like the idea of considering when that facilities conditions assessment is coming back, when we're going to receive the, decision-making analysis of the facilities. There are new pieces of information that are coming towards us in the next 8 weeks. So I think that that'll be all good. And I would say in the meantime, if you have other kind of detailed questions of how you want to look at these, at changing, shifting around the implementation schedule, we're all in agreement that all these projects need to happen. So you don't have that. We're not saying this is none of, some of these, like, don't do them at all. We're asking, is it possible to get the street lighting earlier, and what would that mean? So I'll stop talking, but I just want you to know that's what I heard tonight. And I also heard a board that really paid a lot of attention to long range plan and had a lot of really thoughtful questions about what it all means and how we can do it even better. So again, that's not a bad thing. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. You go.
Oh, no,
Go first. I just need a point of clarification. Is it DPW is still without an electrician, correct?
That
Okay.
is correct.
So I think I remember when we denied that request. I shouldn't say we, because I was not for that, but when the board denied the request and asked DPW to go with a contractor, and you were unable to find that contractor.
Well, just to clarify, the board did eventually authorize us to hire for that position. However, we have been unable to attract and retain an electrician at the current approved salary schedule.
Okay.
So we are working on an additional alternative that I would expect that will be coming back to you at a point in the relatively near future.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And we did approve the construction manager job, and that was not filled.
That is correct. For the same reason, we were unable to attract a qualified candidate at the approved salary schedule.
So clearly, if salary is an issue, we need to deal with that in the budget.
Attorney Polk.
Obviously, I won't be offering any subjective opinions as to your policy decisions or thought processes. But But I did want to touch briefly on something trustee Stokebrand brought up, and that were the code violations. As things are placed under a microscope, again, and you go through all the projects, I think it'd be important for Nathan and I to be able to see any of the projects that you come up with that show any type of code or anything that's not up to code. So we can also provide you at the same time as you're getting all these other reports, liability assessments, because if something would expose this village to something considerably expensive, dangerous, what have you, I think that should also be part of your decision-making process. And I would want us to be able to have the time to provide you with that information before you make these decisions. I understand that some of it might be moot because, hey, if we're gonna replace this at this time, who cares? I mean, the Band-Aid example was spot on. However, if something is so dangerous where people can get shocked, as we heard earlier, and things like that, although there is immunity.
Street lights.
Well, I'm just
Right.
saying, regardless of immunity in some aspects for the village, that is something that Nathan and I think should certainly see and be able to advise you on, because I would hate for us to put something back, for you all to put something back that exposed you to some things that we could have fairly easily prevented.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think with that, we can close this item, and thank you very much for your time, talent, and patience on all of that. With that, we close up new business and move on to 10, report of village officials, 10A, village president. We have a proclamation of summer water action. While I'm trying to get my computer awake, I will say that summer of water action, something like that. This is a gift box that will go to block parties, and it's filled with water advocacy toys and tips, I'll say. And it's really awesome. So you guys can check that out afterwards. Let's see what.
Are there things in there right now?
There are things in there right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh,
after the
exciting.
meeting, after we adjourn, I don't want to lose anybody's attention. I'm reading a proclamation right now. Okay. Oh, I was going to let you do it.
Moi?
Yeah. Department of Public Works or
Fantastic.
chair.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so this is a proclamation for Summer of Water Action. Whereas water is our most valuable natural resource, and whereas the village of Shorewood is fortunate to be bordered by Lake Michigan and the Milwaukee River, two remarkable freshwater resources. And whereas the village of Shorewood has committed resources to the infrastructure providing safe drinking water and stormwater management. And whereas the village of Shorewood has created the Shorewood Waters Project to empower Shorewood residents with solutions to enhance, protect, preserve the waters that border Shorewood. And to whereas that protection includes recognition that we all stewards of the water infrastructure upon which current and future generations depend for public health and safety. As such, we all have a responsibility to educate ourselves in the preservation and protection of water quality. And whereas to support the responsibility of Shorewood Waters Project has created Take the Pledge program, whereby residents can commit to educate themselves and promote behavior changes to help protect our water resources. These pledges and the educational and recreational activities created and promoted by the Shorewood Waters Project will encourage residents to become part of the solution to protecting our waterways.
Thank you. Want to keep going with the proclamation for Public Works Week?
I'd love to. Thank you. All right, so whereas public works service provided in the village of Shorewood are an integral part of our residents' everyday lives, and whereas the support of an understanding and informed citizenry is vital to the efficient operation of public works programs, including sewer and water systems, park and forest maintenance, fleet and facility maintenance, refuse collection, street maintenance and repair, traffic and streetlight system maintenance, and winter operations. And whereas the health and safety and comfort of the residents of the village of Shorewood greatly depends on these facilities and services. And whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction is vitally dependent upon the efforts and skill of public works personnel. And whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff the Village of Shorewood's Department of Public Works is greatly influenced by residents' attitude and understanding of the importance of their work.
Thank you. Now, therefore, I am Nicole McCaig, President of the Village of Shorewood, Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, do hereby proclaim the week of May 22nd, 2022 as National Public Works Week in the Village of Shorewood, and I call upon all residents and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works and to recognize contributions which public works officials make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. Thank you so much. Please extend our thanks and appreciation to the staff.
I will.
And feel free, everyone, to stop by. Great, thank you.
I just
All
want
right. Oh.
to, if I could just piggyback on that, at your places tonight was an invitation to actually attend the Public Works Luncheon on Thursday this week at noon. So if the trustees could just RSVP tomorrow to Leanne by email, whether or not they would be in attendance so there's an accurate head count, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I forgot that. Thank you. All right. I also just wanted to acknowledge that Clerk Harrell received a tuition scholarship for the UW Green Bay Clerks Institute. And while that is why that's important is I really appreciate that she found it out that there was a tuition scholarship available. And even though we have it covered in the budget for her to do this type of training, she made herself available to go through those steps and saved us some money. So thank you very much, Clerk Carroll.
Yeah.
Let's see, village president appointments. I had one. There was an opening on the plan commission and I appointed Kathleen Flynn Post to that. It's in your that memo and application are in your packet. And I believe with that, we can move on to village trustees. And don't forget to stop by Pollinator Palooza and take your water pledge on Saturday morning.
One other item, if you'd like to cover,
Yes.
because it incorrectly got listed under my report, was the North Shore Fire Department Board meeting from May 10th.
Oh, was that under yours instead?
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, I just wanted to include that I attended that meeting. They presented the annual fiscal report or annual report, financial report. So I wanted to direct you to that. You do not need to read it, but I wanted you to know how to find it in case you're interested. The board, the organization is in good financial health. I'm happy to report that. And so I think I can pass it on to village trustees. Any reports of village trustees? Trustee Ursink.
Yeah, as we're gearing up for the farmers market, we have an opportunity for a community booth, and I really wanted to approach the village for potential spaces in that booth to talk about different projects, whether it be the water project, all those projects. So what I'd like to do is I was hoping Chris would be here, but I can connect you all with sign up Genus, and maybe you can talk to department heads to see if this would be a good opportunity for village staff to promote.
Come in on a
weekend. Oh, geez. Sorry, I apologize.
I don't want to hear any capacity arguments from you.
But I figured before we go out, there's plenty of other takers outside of it. Before we go public with it, I would love to, maybe there's volunteers in different committees that would like to take this on. So, but I can send that your way. Thank you.
Sorry to tease you.
That's all right.
All right.
I
any
would
other-
suggest maybe Trustee Ursink wants to sit there and receive feedback on behalf of the board.
Oh, I feel like I do that every week at the farmer's market, but
And explain the lead service lateral replacement program.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Other trustees. Okay. Trustee Kudo's looking at the clock, so we got to move along. I'm just kidding. I'm teasing. Village manager?
No report, thank you.
Except for a special DPW meeting
North
Oh,
Oakland.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the bullets got out of order.
Mhm.
Yes, so we are going to be trying to coordinate a special public works meeting. This is in follow-up to us wanting to do that block by block review of North Oakland Avenue and then inviting our stakeholder groups. The engineer had a delay revolving around a different issue, so we're trying to reschedule that on a night that works for both the Public Works Committee and then also provides advance notice to the community group. So we will keep you posted, and for those individuals on Public Works, I'm hoping to be in contact with you to schedule that, hopefully this week.
Would that be in person?
Yes.
Future items of consideration.
I'm just wondering if this, if this is where it could slot in, but I've talked to Leanne about this a couple times, and I hate to increase capacity anywhere, but I would love to create a special meeting to talk about the trees of Shorewood with our community. I think it's a questions that I get all the time about our ash trees, about different trees. You could see how lively the conversation was tonight about the trees. So at some point when there is a little downtime for your, the arborists or, the urban forestry department, I would love to schedule something where we could talk about the trees and the community can kind of have that one-on-one conversation with those folks.
Interesting. Thanks. All right. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion to adjourn by trustee Ursink, seconded by trustee Kudo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 9:39. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so this can't.
Stay here the whole time. And
Did you say I was like, I felt like it was one of those things from like.
Was the second one, so-
just so much.
But now. I not?
Take care.
Discussion
Maybe it's
through
not.
prior
Bad touch.
W and everything with the things. I
It's
think the
not.
lead is,
Oh,
Once
sorry.
you-
I should have thought about that.
responsive.
hear the explanation.
You're doing it more.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Gonna put it here so it won't.
It can't be
'Cause
that
I- you know, I
sensitive.
talked
It
to
has
my-
to be like a.
Yeah, I'll give it
like
to
an iPad.
Chris in
Well,
the
that's the
morning.
thing.
Yeah.
It's